Peace and love, brothers and sisters within the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. You already know who it is. Your brother, Archbishop Dion Belmont from the illustrious Noble House of Belmont. Today is December 2nd, 2974, which is equivalent to your 2024 Gregorian calendar. And like we say here, it's a beautiful time to be alive. Have to give honors to our Creator, to the head of our house, as well as to our Lord, our Father, our Christ figure known today as King Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet. Have to give honors to our Queen, Lisa Jordan from the Royal House of Godwinson, to the heirs, to the trustees, successors, to the loyal subjects, as well as the officers, and to the loyal people within the realm who don't know who they are yet, but once they do their genealogy and start doing the great work, they'll start figuring out that they are saved and they are in the greatest place and position they can be in this day and time and age, which is gaining the consciousness regarding the history of the Kingdom of England and the people who make up that kingdom. All right, so I want to go ahead and get started with this lesson today. It's talking about the so-called Black Loyalists. Now, for those of you who've been paying attention to the previous lessons, should understand that the Black Loyalists are actually those who have been made subjects of Great Britain, and the subjects of Great Britain are actually those who are come from the Kingdom of England as well as the Kingdom of Scotland. Now, you're going to hear within these videos information that may seem contradictory because they're always going to constantly keep trying to tell you that these people are so-called Africans. For those who know the information, know that African or the term Africa is actually code word for Berber or Libyan. They're not going to tell you. You just need to know that. And once we show you again through the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, you will start getting the gist regarding who these people were ethnically. And not only ethnically were they Berbers there in those so-called territories, but they was also known as Berbers here in this territory that you call North America. But we're not going to go into that right now in this video. We're just going to go and just focus on the understanding and trying to find where are the descendants of the so-called people who were named Black Loyalists here in this territory that you call the United States, because this seemed to be something that no one talks about, and they make you think that all of the so-called descendants of the Black Loyalists are in a territory what we call Canada today, or went to the area where they call Western Africa. And we already know that can't be the case, because if they were fighting a so-called war in this territory here, what we call the United States, then there has to be some descendants who were so-called left here, who were re-enslaved based off of the treaty, as well based off of the animosity towards those who are actually claiming to be subjects of Great Britain. So I don't want to go too far into that without us going ahead and take a look at these videos. Stay tuned.
Their stories reveal the complexities of loyalty, freedom, and the quest for a better life amidst the turmoil of war. This video will explore who the Black Loyalists were, their motivations for aligning with the British, the challenges they faced during and after the war, and their lasting impact on American and Canadian society. In the context of the American Revolution, the term Loyalist refers to those colonists who remained loyal to the British Crown. Among them were thousands of black men and women who saw the British as a means to achieve freedom and security. Many Black Loyalists were enslaved individuals who, facing the harsh realities of slavery in the colonies, sought refuge and autonomy by siding with the British. Their motivations were varied and deeply personal.
So before I go further along into the video, for those of you who are just now getting a chance to check this information out, or just now hearing this, originally those people who occupied the territory that we call the British Isles, historically were originally copper-colored folks. The DNA proves it. The historical accounts prove it. It's just that modern people today, unfortunately, who've been living off the virtues of that history, don't want to accept that the true descendants are those who look like me and you today. and we still have the right to claim who we are once you've been able to prove it via genealogy. That's the reason why the court is the domain to bring these arguments, because they're going to be the ones who's going to understand and recognize what it is that you're saying, compared to try to speak to, those folks who have ulterior motives to prevent you from actually understanding this information. Because clearly, like I said, they're not trying to hide it. It's all out here. It's open in the public. It's just about you being able to identify yourself as, this is your information. This is your history. And for you to know that, you need to know the history and the territory that you're currently domiciling, as well know the history of your ancestors. That's why genealogy is important. So let's go ahead and continue the video.
Often driven by the desire for freedom from bondage and the hope of a better life, the British government, recognizing the potential of black loyalists, issued proclamations that promised freedom to enslaved individuals who joined their ranks. One of the most significant of these was Lord Dunmore's proclamation in 1775, which declared that any enslaved person who escaped to join the British forces would be granted freedom. This announcement sparked hope among enslaved individuals in the colonies, many of whom began to flee plantations and join British troops. The prospect of freedom was a powerful motivator, as the British Army became a beacon of hope for those trapped in the brutal system of slavery. As the war progressed, thousands of black men and women joined the British forces. They served in various capacities, including soldiers, laborers, and support personnel. Some fought bravely in combat, while others provided essential support services. Their contributions were significant, even though their roles were often marginalized and undervalued in historical accounts. Despite their loyalty and sacrifices, many black loyalists faced a harsh reality. The war did not end the systemic racism and discrimination they experienced. The plight of black loyalists did not end with the conclusion of the American Revolution in 1783. As the war came to an end, many loyalists were forced to flee the newly formed United States. This exodus was fueled by a fear of retribution from their former enslavers and neighbors who viewed their allegiance to the British as a betrayal. The British government facilitated the resettlement of many black loyalists to British territories, notably Nova Scotia in Canada, and later.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to talk about, that, as you can see, like they said, right after the war, there was a lot of animosity. A lot of the so-called slave owners were, based off of the treaty, were so that they were promised their property that George Washington was supposed to be recovering for them. Well, the British were also trying to enforce their proclamation as well, regarding telling those who fought on the side of the crown will still be given their freedom. Well, that didn't set well for the so-called slave owners, So now they are going throughout the territories and just enslaving anybody who was quote-unquote melanated, or AKA what we call black today, and placing them in bondage, even if you was considered free prior to the war and you didn't choose any sides, you was a neutral party. It didn't matter. They was on a rampage because of, they were losing their property, aka chattel property, which they were using to make money. Because as you can see during this time, which is still affecting us today, that human trafficking was a lucrative business. All right, so now knowing that, you will see that a lot of those heirs and the descendants who were considered subjects of Great Britain, who were technically English heirs and Scottish heirs and Irish heirs, who were just replaced into bondage. Now, I'm going to go let the video play out a little bit more before I start showing a couple of other slides before we wrap the video up, because I want to start making these segments, quick, till we start getting to the point where people start asking questions, start leaving comments. So therefore, we'll go deeper into this information. But like I told you guys before, and on many of these videos, we are in a state of emergency. The heirs, we are reaching out and then trying to let you know at the world as a whole on an international level that we do know who we are and we do need assistance. And only way for us to get assistance is we need to let you know what's going on with us. Why are we been still in these conditions if we were supposed to be pretty much been set free and have peace treaties today that's supposed to support our position and status, and why we don't actually have our land being recovered to us as us being heirs. Like why we are still fighting to recover what was already supposed to be guaranteed and granted. And if we're still dealing with this, that must means that somewhere down the road, someone is not keeping up their end of the bargain. So now we have to start making these claims, putting it out there to the world as a whole. So hopefully we can start getting some type of assistance, because as you can see, not too many people know this information the way that they should. They feel it. You can see folks talk about it here and there on certain platforms, but you have yet to really truly see the Descendants as a whole until King Clifford Jefferson came in return to start putting in the movement and actions in regarding trying to bring us back to full life, so therefore we can inherit what was already supposed to be given back to us. All right, so let's continue.
To Sierra Leone in Africa. In Nova Scotia, the arrival of Black Loyalists marked a significant change in the demographic landscape. The British promised them land, but the reality was often different. Many Black Loyalists found themselves facing harsh conditions, limited resources, and unfulfilled promises. The land that was allocated to them was often poor and insufficient for farming, leading to struggles for survival. Additionally, they encountered racism and discrimination from white settlers in Nova Scotia, who were not pleased with the arrival of Black Loyalists. Despite these challenges, Black Loyalists worked hard to establish communities and build lives for themselves. They contributed to the development of various settlements, such as Birchtown, which became one of the largest communities of Black Loyalists in Canada. The resilience and determination of these individuals were evident as they sought to create a sense of belonging and identity in a new land. They formed churches, schools, and social organizations, laying the foundation for future generations. The journey of the Black Loyalists did not end in Nova Scotia. In 1792, a significant number of Black Loyalists moved to Sierra Leone, a colony established by the British as a settlement for freed slaves. This move was motivated by the desire for land ownership and a better quality of life. The establishment of the colony was fraught with difficulties as settlers faced unfamiliar environments, disease, and conflicts with indigenous populations. Yet, the Black Loyalists who settled in Sierra Leone contributed to the development of the colony and played a crucial role in shaping its society. The legacy of the Black Loyalists extends beyond their immediate struggles and contributions. Their experiences shed light on the broader themes of freedom, loyalty, and identity in the context of the American Revolution. They challenged the prevailing notions of race, demonstrating that freedom transcended all. The narratives of Black Loyalists also highlight the complexities of the Revolutionary War, revealing how it was not merely a struggle for independence for white colonists, but also a pivotal moment for enslaved individuals seeking liberation. In contemporary discussions about race and history, the stories of the Black Loyalists serve as a reminder of the African American experiences that shaped the nation. They challenge us to reconsider the traditional narratives of the American Revolution and acknowledge the contributions of all individuals, regardless of race or background. By recognizing the significance of Black Loyalists, we honor their struggles and triumphs, ensuring that their legacies are not forgotten. The experiences of Black Loyalists during the American Revolution reveal the intricacies of loyalty, freedom, and resilience. Their motivations for siding with the British were rooted in the desire for liberation from the horrors of slavery, and their contributions during the war were vital to the British cause. However, their struggles did not end with the war. They faced significant challenges in their new homes in Nova Scotia and Sierra Leone, where they worked tirelessly to build communities and assert their identities. The legacy of the Black Loyalists is a testament to their enduring spirit and an essential part of the broader narrative of American and Canadian history. In conclusion, the stories of the Black Loyalists deserve our attention and respect. The legacies of the Black Loyalists continue to influence important conversations about race and identity in our society today. By learning about their experiences, we can better understand the complexities of loyalty and the sacrifices that people made for their freedom. Their stories remind us to honor all those who have fought for freedom, and that the quest for justice and equality is ongoing. By embracing these lessons, we can create a more just world that values the resilience of the heroes and fighters who came before us, and ensures that their voices are still heard in the stories we share today.
And so we got a chance to get a nice little summary and breakdown regarding the Black Loyalists and the territories that they said that they traversed to after the so-called war. And you got an opportunity to hear about the adversity and the plight that they still had to endure even after them being freed from bondage, from, the war, as them being now British subjects. But if you know, before the so-called American Revolution, everybody, no matter if you was considered a slave or not, everyone in the colonies were considered subjects of Great Britain. What make this more important to understand is those who were still subjects of Great Britain who didn't leave, who were stuck here in the so-called territories you call the United States when they were still the colonies. Their descendants are still here, as prisoners of war, based off of what we also heard from the video. So before we go into the next video, let's go ahead and take a look at what it said, the post-aftermath treatment on Wikipedia regards the Black Loyalists. Okay, so it says, the post-war treatment. When peace negotiations began after the siege of Yorktown, a primary issue of debate was the fate of Black British soldiers. Loyalists who remained in the United States wanted Black soldiers returned so their chances of receiving reparations for the damaged property would be increased. But British military leaders fully intended to keep the promise of freedom made to Black soldiers despite the anger of the Americans. So, as they're saying that the British were trying to maintain their promise in regards to allowing those who fought on their side, who were known as the Black Loyalists, to pretty much be free from having to go back into bondage underneath the Americans. It says, in the chaos as the British evacuated Loyalist refugees, mainly from New York and Charleston, American enslavers attempted to enslave and re-enslave many people. Some will kidnap any Black person. So they say any Black person, including those born free before the war, and enslave them. So anybody in the so-called colonies who was considered so-called Black by complexion, they were re-enslaving. They were enslaving you, even if you were known to be so-called from a free family. They were placing you in bondage. So this is showing you that, based off of this information, which is in the records, which is proof that subjects of Great Britain who were copper-colored, melanated people were placed in bondage in the United States prior to and after so-called American Revolution. And they never truly got the opportunity to know who they are ever since so-called the freeing of the so-called slaves in the United States via the 1865 Emancipation Proclamation, nor from the so-called 13th or 14th Amendment. It may says allowing black people to have the right to be so-called citizens, but it never really truly told you who you were prior to you actually being placed in bondage and now being given the so-called right and privilege to now become a so-called citizen of their occupation, aka their political jurisdiction. All right. So it says the United States Congress ordered George Washington to retrieve any American property, including enslaved people, from the British as stipulated by the Treaty of Paris of 1783. Because the Treaty of Paris of 1783 said all property was supposed to be returned to both parties prior to the situations of the war. So those of you who were known to be so-called chattel property, unfortunately, a lot of our brothers and sisters, even if you so-called white or black, because both parties were actually slaves during this time too. They may not talk about it as much, but it's there to verify it in the history records. But you had to be given back to your so-called owner, and those who were not so-called originally slaves were placed in bondage because of, like they say, the feud that was going on because of the stipulations of the war. So now understanding that, and you now having the ability to put yourself into the mind frame of how things were happening back then, now you can kind of get a reason, now you can get a better feel where I'm going with this. Because as I'm showing you, like, history repeating itself. But in this case, it's going to repeat itself in regards to us having the opportunity to be free once again. And that freedom is going to come first mentally. It's a mental freedom first. And once you become freed out of the mental bondage, then your physical body can now start being free. But in the meantime, you're not truly there until you can actually prove it with evidence. And the history as well as the laws was going to help you. Now let's go to, because we need to know who these so-called black people are, because we keep telling you that that term is a misnomer, it's an adjective. So this is it's the 1740 South Carolina Negro Act. I keep bringing it up because, as you see, it's legislation, and it's in the territory we call South Carolina, which a lot of these so-called loyalists were so-called coming from. In 1740, when South Carolina was underneath the auspices of Great Britain, King George II, who's the father of King George III. All right, so let it go ahead and let it load up. And plus, you have to understand we're dealing with Mercury retrograde, so things are going to be kind of finicky when it comes down to the technology, so you have to bear with me. And where we're going to be going to, we're going to go to specifically Section 4 of the South Carolina Negro Act. And even though, for those who are going to be watching this, you're going to have parties who are going to clearly say, oh, this is not in effect. That's not the point of this document. The point of it is the language, because it identifies those who are known as Negro, who they truly are. And we know Negro is synonymous with the English word black. All right. So they're saying black loyalists. That's another way of them saying Negro loyalists. All right, well, let's see who these Negro loyalists are. aka who are these Negroes? Don't forget, brothers and sisters, to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Um, we need your assistance as much as possible. This lesson is Where's the Black Loyalist Descendants? So we're looking for those descendants of loyalists, and we're not calling you black loyalists. That's just what you're going to be known as in the books. And you know that those loyalists are actually truly the descendants of the Kingdom of England, as well the Kingdom of Scotland, who were made subjects of Great Britain via the Act of Union of 1707, which we're going to show here relatively soon. So you can see that us English people were forced to be British subjects. And the reason why they were truly fighting on the British side is because they were hoping to be able to go back to the life that they were underneath before they were placed into bondage. Okay. Apologize. Okay, so so here we go. Negro Law, South Carolina, Chapter 1, the status of the Negro, his rights and disabilities. And they're telling you this is the Act of 1740 from Section 1. All right, but we're going to go down to Section 4. And it says, Section 4, the term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers and their descendants. So they're explaining, or they're letting you know that the term Negro, which we know is now known as black, that term, which is an adjective, is describing those folks who are actually the ancient Berbers, calling them Africans. But they're truly not this, nor that. African is just a code word for Berbers. How can we tell? Well, let's go to the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. As you see, it says Encyclopedia Britannica, 1911. And we're going to go straight to, you see, it says Berbers. So we're dealing with Berbers. I'm going to go to this section right here, where it says connection. Starting with connection. You can read the rest of this on your own, but we're going to start with connection. It says connection has been traced between the early Libyan race and the Cro-Magnon and other early European races, and later the Basque peoples, Iberians, Picts, Celts, and Gauls. The megalithic monuments of Iberia and Celtic Europe have their counterparts in northern Africa, and it is suggested that these were all erected by the same race. By whatever name they may be known, Berbers and Libyans in Africa, so there you go, the connection, Berbers, Libyans in Africa, Iberians in Spain, Celts, Gauls, Picts in France and Britain. So they just told you, based off of the megalithic monuments that they see in both of these territories, that all of these people are one and the same. So the Berbers and Libyans, Iberians, Celts, Gauls, Picts are all the same folks, which we identify today as Berbers, that you know as Negro, aka black people. So that's the connection, to show you that those who you call Africans aren't truly so-called Africans, they're actually Berbers. But genealogy will determine your nationality, aka the nation that these Berbers come from. As you can see from what we're showing you regarding of the Black Loyalists, that these are actually Berbers who come from a territory that you call Great Britain, because of the so-called Picts, the Celts. These people will be in the territory we call Britain. But then you got the Gauls in France, And then you had the Iberians in Spain. These were all the people who were so-called fighting for land and territory here in so-called America. These were those kingdoms who so-called was fighting for that had colonies here in America. And yet all of these people are truly indigenous Berbers. So you have the Kingdom of Spain, which is Iberia. Their indigenous people were Berbers. You have the Kingdom of France, or New Franquia. Their indigenous people were Gauls, Gauls. Those are, as you see, Berbers as well. Then you have British, or the British colonization. As you can see, those would be Picts from so-called Scotland, or Alba. And you have the Celts, or the Celtite Iberians, or the Celtite Britons, who will be coming from the territory we call Ireland, and also England. All right. And then you got, of course, the Anglo-Saxon, who's the Germanic tribes, who were still barbarian, aka Berber tribes, who came into the territory. They say they invaded, but they didn't invade. They just came to help their cousins, who were the Britons, who were other Berbers, to defend them from the Romans. But we'll talk about that in another video. But now you can see the historical connection of who these people are and why they were so-called fighting for the British crown, even though they themselves may not have been British. They were actually truly English nationals and so-called Scottish nationals who were forced to be British subjects because of the 1707 Acts of Union, which we're going to go ahead and show right now. And then is the Acts of Union of 1707. Union with Scotland, Act 1706, Act of Parliament, long title, an Act of a Union of the two kingdoms of England and Scotland. Territorial extent, Kingdom of England. So the Act of Union is affecting the Kingdom of England, and the Kingdom of England is over here in the territory you call United States, aka the British American colonies. So yes, the British American colonies, or the United States of America, is doing business on Crown land, which is what? The Kingdom of England. So the Kingdom of England is is here right now, brothers and sisters, for those of you who don't understand this information. And it just says, because I'm only going to read briefly, it says, the Acts of Union refer to two Acts of Parliament, one by the Parliament of England in 1706, the other by the Parliament of Scotland in 1707. They put into effect the Treaty of Union agreed on July 22nd, 1706, which merged the previously separate Kingdom of England and Kingdom of Scotland into a single Kingdom of Great Britain, with Queen Anne as its sovereign. The acts took effect on May 1st, 1707, creating the Parliament of Great Britain, based in the Palace of Westminster. So you see, this is when the Parliament of Great Britain actually truly came into existence, was in 1707. This is when we actually officially became British subjects in 1707. All right, so this wasn't something, we didn't want to merge. The English never really truly wanted to merge, but these were those who were the constituents from the Kingdom of Scotland, who were doing this. All right, so let's go ahead and continue before we come to the close of this. Where's the descendants of the Black Loyalists, aka the descendants of those Anglo-Saxon Berbers, who are known as the English nationals here in the territory you know as the British American colonies, aka the United States of America. All right, so we're just going to talk briefly real quick about the Book of Negroes. And it says, the Book of Negroes is a document created by Brigadier General Samuel Birch under the direction of Sir Guy Carleton that records names and descriptions of 3,000 black loyalists, enslaved Africans, aka Berbers, who escaped to the British lines during the American Revolution and were evacuated to points in Nova Scotia as free people of color. The first African person in Nova Scotia arrived at the founding of Port Royal 1605. You can read the rest of this information right here yourself. The point I wanted to get to was here. It says, According to the Treaty of Paris 1783, the United States argued for the return of all property, including slaves. The British refused to return the slaves to whom they promised freedom during the war for joining their cause. The detailed records were created to document the freed people whom the British resettled in Nova Scotia, along with other loyalists. The book was assembled by Samuel Birch, namesake of Birchtown, Nova Scotia, under the direction of Sir Guy Carleton. And that's it. And once again, as you can see, it doesn't speak in regards to many people in the territories we call the United States today. Why don't they speak about these descendants? Why don't they talk about those who were re-enslaved and then after they were so-called free after 1865 or the 13th or 14th Amendment? Why they never talked about their nationality prior to them being subjected as state citizens or wards of the state? There's still heirs here. All right, and that's the reason why these lessons have to be done and brought to the light of day, because these are questions that seem to not have proper answers, because there seem to have to be some form of ulterior motive or agenda in place regarding those who don't want to talk about this information. Why they feel so hush-hush in regards to, not want to talk about what needs to be spoken. And in this case, us heirs are getting the dirty end of the stick or the short end of the stick each and every time because of they're not holding their part as being trustees. So now we have to start doing whatever we can to get our voice heard. And the best way to do so is show these lessons to the world as a whole, so therefore you can see that we're not making this up. This is not something that should be taken lightly, and we need to have people come to hear these words, so therefore we can start putting ourselves in a advantageous position so we can actually truly enjoy the fruits of our labor, so therefore we can pass what was promised to us back then to our heirs tomorrow. But until then, we're going to continue to keep suffering. We're going to continue to keep having these corporations bully us and try to put us in a position of bondage via this so-called paper money that we call currency today. We're dealing with a high level of inflation. You see that people can't pay their rent, the food, the utilities. It's crazy out here. On top of the families are broken. As you see, we have to do work of this magnitude to show you how we have continued being separated and placed in a position of that doesn't benefit us, going all the way back to the time of the Norman Conquest of 1066, and we're still dealing with those plights and atrocities today. So as an heir, it's my obligation and duty to come out and speak up for the rest of us heirs who are still unconscious in regards to not knowing who they are, and for them to know that our king has returned, who's a true representative for the English people, and his name is King Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet. So please, brothers and sisters, like, share, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you check out the Third Temple English Church of England. Give a shout out to the king. He's doing a great job day in and day out to try to show the world that he is who he say he is. He is the de jure King of England. So we need to stand by our king, because our allegiance is perpetual, and without him there will be no us. So please stay tuned for the next videos. We love you. Peace.